motion to approve the May 2021 proposed rate is 1.0369 on an estimated assessment value as of May 18, 2021. Of $30,113,584,346.
That's great. Can I just ask for a clarification? You said 1.0369?
1.0359.
So,
Do I need a roll call? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn? All in favor?
Aye.
Great. On to the business meeting. Guess we call to order again. You have not heard from, no one's heard from Curtis? Roll call, please.
Director Asner. Director Snyder. Director Faulkner. Director Hudson. Director Mueller.
Here.
Vice President Petroff. President Cuneo.
Here. It's all right. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. We have recognitions first of our interpreters.
Board, President Cuneo, Board of Directors, and Dr. Keenan. I'm Jennifer Henry, and tonight I would like to recognize a few ladies. As we start our recognition, I would like to call forward Ms. McGrath and Patty Cooper. Join me at the podium. Both of you.
can they stop interpreting?
Camera. Camera up here should pick up if you would like to continue signing. This evening, we would like to recognize our sign language interpreters, Ms. Melissa Graff and Ms. Patty Kuderna. They are present at each board meeting, providing sign language interpretation to ensure our meetings are accessible to our whole community. We are deeply grateful to Melissa and Patty, but also to all of our interpreters who make a difference by enabling meaningful understanding between individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing and those who do not speak sign language. We'd like to present you with these certificates of appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies, for all your hard work. And thank you for being here all the time.
Thank you.
Before we go to the new directions and introduction, I want the record to reflect Curtis is here. Please make sure that that's noted in our record. And Curtis, who's out there if you want to stop by and pick something up? Thank you. All right. Our new director's introduction, please.
Good evening, President Cuneo, Board of Directors, and Dr. Keenan. I'm Chiquita McRiddle, the Executive Director of Partner Districts, and it's great to be here with all of you this evening. As we move forward with our focus on instruction, we have had the opportunity to work side by side with leadership in partner districts to identify candidates for Director of Special Education. Through this process, we have identified candidates for 9 districts. Those districts are Clayton, Ferguson Florissant, Hazelwood, Jennings, Kirkwood, Lindbergh, Rittner, University City, and Webster Groves. 33 interviews were held in partner districts. Tonight, I would like to introduce these individuals, as well as the Assistant Executive Director of Partner Districts, the Director of Low Incidence, and lead area coordinators who will become directors in their current districts during the 21-22 school year. During the next few weeks, we will be working with each current director and transitioning director to cover open projects, any tasks, and any upcoming events in those particular districts. And the areas that we will focus on will include communications, disproportionality, finance, human resources, partner district leadership and operations, SSD schools and career tech ed, teaching and learning, technology, transportation, universal summer support, as well as extended school year. Additionally, mentors will be identified to support our new directors, and the same level of support from members of our district-level leadership team will be available as well. Lastly, we are working to develop an onboarding process for new administrators, which will include all departments and divisions here at our central office. Again, these efforts will support administrators with understanding processes and procedures to effectively support our work moving forward. At this time, I will start with those introductions, and as I call your name, please come forward and remain standing until we get to the end. Dr. Tammy Yates, Assistant Executive Director of Partner Districts. Dr. Yates has been a lead area coordinator in Brentwood for 1 year. She has also served as the Executive Director of Special Services in Fort Zumwalt School District, area coordinator for both Normandy and Ferguson Florissant, administrative intern in Ferguson Florissant, as well as special education teacher at McClure High School. Highlights include board member with Mo Case, president of the Local Administrators of Special Education, Missouri Council of Administrators of Special Education, Nonviolent Crisis Prevention Certified Trainer, annual presenter at the Crisis Intervention Team Training for Law Enforcement Officers. Maureen Nelson. Maureen Nelson will be the Director of Special Education in the Bayless School District. She currently holds the title of Lead Area Coordinator. Prior to this role, she was an administrative intern, resource teacher, IEP chairperson, junior high school English language arts teacher, and high school communication arts teacher for the Bayless School District. She's also served as the center director and teacher for Bayless or ACE Learning Centers. Highlights include planning improvement on least restrictive environment data and MAP scores by realigning services provided at elementary, junior high, and high school levels. She's created and implemented SEB programs at the elementary, junior high, and high school levels, as well as curriculum chair in Bayless, Teacher Leadership Academy, and mentoring new teacher level staff. Dr. Trevina Hostetler is currently the lead area coordinator in the Brentwood School District. She has served as area coordinator in Kirkwood, assistant principal in Farmington, process coordinator in Farmington, high school special education teacher, Waynesville. Highlights include board member, advocacy co-chair, and communications co-chair for Missouri Council of Administrators of Special Education, basketball coach in Waynesville, Potosi, Iron County, and Southwest School District, as well as the Director of Special Education for Southwest RV Schools. Melissa Logan is currently the area coordinator in Clayton. She will serve as the Director of Special Education in Clayton School District next school year. Melissa has served as an SSD admin intern for the Central Region. She was also the SSD teacher at Pine Lawn Elementary, as well as Flynn Park Elementary. She also was a teacher for St. Louis Public Schools. Highlights include received training in adaptive schools, charting the life course, implicit bias, cognitive coaching, help for billing, poverty simulation, standards-based IEPs, inclusion matters, behavior intervention planning, as well as teacher leadership academy. Dr. Shanice Terrell will serve as the Director of Special Education for the Ferguson-Florissant School District. She currently serves in the role of Area Coordinator for Parkway School District. She has been an elementary principal for the Hazelwood School District as well as Riverview Gardens School District. She's also served as an instructional coach in both Hazelwood as well as Riverview Gardens and classroom teacher. Highlights include St. Louis Regional Literacy Association, Educators for Social Justice Board member, Community Advisory Board, 9 Network of Public Media, and she's also received the NAACP Benjamin Hooks Award for Educational Excellence. Dr. Donna Ellis currently serves as lead area coordinator in the Hancock School District, and she will serve as Director of Special Education in Hancock School District. Prior to these roles, she has served as literacy coach in St. Louis Public Schools as well as classroom teacher in St. Louis Public Schools. Highlights include implementing PLCs to increase collaborative data analysis and support using research-based instructional strategies, co-chairperson of district-level PBIS committee, as well as professional associations with ASCD, United Way, MCSA, and CEC. Dr. Tanya Nall will join us hopefully soon. She is participating in interviews in a partner district. Dr. Tanya Nall currently serves as Director of Special Education for the Ferguson-Florissant School District and will transition to the Jennings School District in the upcoming school year. She has served also as a CBI teacher as well as a teacher in Riverview Gardens. Dr. Nall's highlights include closing the achievement gap between disabled and non-disabled students in math and ELA while at first floor, and instituting cohort data team processes that resulted in an increase in the graduation rate for students with educational disabilities from 68% to 91.6%. Dr. Tanni Davis had a prior obligation and will not be here with us this evening. She currently serves as the area coordinator in the Kirkwood School District and will serve as the Director of Special Education in Kirkwood next school year. Prior to her work with Special School District, she was an assistant principal, summer school principal, as well as process coordinator for Northwest. She also has teaching experience in Northwest and St. Louis Public Schools. Her highlights include strengthening connections between SSD and Kirkwood, increasing transparency and communication, writing, evaluating, and adapting curriculum, and collaborating with staff and parents to handle discipline concerns. Dr. Amy Blumensfield currently serves as area coordinator in the Rockwood School District and will serve as Director of Special Education for Parkway School District next school year. Dr. Blumensfield has been an area coordinator for many years. She also has served as a nonviolent crisis intervention instructor, an effective practice specialist, a teacher, paraprofessional, as well as special needs coordinator. Highlights include Educator for Social Justice Board member, Autism Speaks, Grants Chair, and Walk Now Chair, Make-A-Wish, Wish Granter, and she's also presented Autism 101 at UMSL, Autism Speaks 101 at WashU, ADHD in the Classroom and Supports for Challenging Behaviors for CAJE, and Meeting the Needs of ALI as well. Angie Fowler. Angie Fowler will serve as the Director of Special Education in the Rittner School District. She currently holds the role of Area Coordinator in Rittner School District. Prior to these roles, she has served as an administrative intern, facilitator, process monitoring data coach, as well as self-contained teacher. Highlights include collaborating with stakeholders to develop an area plan, supporting teachers and area coordinators in data teams, professional learning in the areas of curriculum-based measures, progress monitoring, administration, and scoring of measures using Ames Web software. Dr. Arkandria Bentley also had a previous engagement and will not join us tonight. She currently serves as the area coordinator in the Parkway School District and will join us as the Director of Special Education in University City. Prior to these roles, she has served as an administrative intern, special education teacher, as well as adjunct professor at Harrisville State University. Highlights include serving as the Title IX Series Investigator and Compliance Coordinator, and professional development in Kagan strategies, inclusive practices, new educator evaluation process, adaptive schools, trauma-informed care, and SSD Leadership Academy. Shantae Wakefield will serve as the Director of Special Education for the Webster Grove School District. She currently serves in the role of Area Coordinator for the Ladue School District. Prior to these roles, she was also an Area Coordinator in the Riverview Garden School District as well as a facilitator. She also has experience as a self-contained essential skills supervisory teacher, special education English co-teacher, and IEP chairperson. Highlights include National Institute for School Leadership graduate, Baldrige Continuous Classroom Improvement Facilitator, Special Education Head Coach, and Certified Human EX Ventures Screener. Julie Schrader. Julie Schrader currently serves the role of Lead Area Coordinator in Valley Park. She will take on the role of Director of Special Education in Valley Park in the upcoming school year. Prior to these roles, she served as Area Coordinator in Kirkwood, Special Education Teacher for both Special School District and Epworth, as well as Lee Summit School District. Highlights include adaptive school training, positive behavior support training, Leadership Academy, professional development trainer in continuous classroom improvement, classroom learning systems, data teaming, co-teaching, IEP process, and transition planning. Dr. Janice Schaefer will serve as the Director of Special Education for the Hazelwood School District. Dr. Schaefer is joining us as a new member of our leadership team, and her history of work includes academic and behavioral interventionist for Arch Community Schools, discipline hearing officer in Hazelwood, adjunct instructor for SIU Carbondale, Section 504 coordinator, and executive director for class education services. Highlights include she has published a number of educational journals and newsletters. She's presented at local, state, and national conferences, and she is a member of the Missouri Council for Administrators for Special Education, Pi Lambda Theta Educational Honor Society, and the Gifted Association of Missouri. Dr. Werther currently serves as the Director of Special Education Services in the Hazelwood School District. Next year, he will hold the title of Director of Low Incidence Programs. His work has included, of course, Director, Assistant Principal, as well as Area Coordinator in the Hazelwood School District and Special Education Teacher in Parkway. Highlights include transition of deaf of hard of hearing program to a centralized program in Hazelwood, as well as task force on blind student academic and vocational performance through DESE, Professional Learning Communities District Chair, and Instructional Data Team Leader. I introduce to you our new administrative members for the 21-22 school year. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Teaching plan.
So our first agenda item tonight will be Dr. Bauer will be updating the board on the 2021-22 music plan. So introduce the process that the board will take and how we'll update them periodically throughout the year. Bauer.
Good evening, President Cuneo, Vice President Potroff, board members, Dr. Keenan. My name is Paul Bauer. I retired from the district last year. I've been working this year on strategic planning for the district. And I want to give you a quick update of where we are so far. Going to cover three things in this presentation. Going to cover a report on the plan. Going to talk about some next steps before we actually implement the plan, and start that conversation around our CCIP, or our Comprehensive School Improvement Plan. Start off, for those of you who weren't here when we started this process, what is strategic planning? Strategic planning is a pattern of decisions that essentially determines what the district is and what the district does. Defines what type of organization the district wants to be. Next slide, please. In developing this strategic plan this year, you can see we had several steps to this. First thing, our board members reviewed the district mission, vision, and values, core values. That is a very important endeavor, because the mission, vision, and values drive the strategic plan and should drive everything that the district does. Before we really got work on the plan, we got stakeholder input. We identified some committees to be working on reviewing the data and developing the plan. We collected a lot of external and internal data. We used those data to generate SWOT analyses. A SWOT analysis looks at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We identified strategic priorities, and then based on that, we developed goals and strategies. Next up. Before we go too much farther, since one of the things that I'm going to talk about tonight is the CCIP, I want to clear up or say real clearly what our CCIP is. If you look at what many districts do, some districts develop a strategic plan and call it a CCIP. Some districts develop a CCIP and call it a strategic plan. Ideally, you would want both, because if you look at the difference there, the strategic plan focuses on goals for the organization, how the organization will sustain and thrive. Whereas the CCIP is a very mission-focused operations plan. The strategic plan talks about the direction of the entire organization. So we're talking about operations as well as instruction. The CCIP is a roadmap specifically to improve student achievement. The strategic plan focuses, as I've said, on those things that are important to the organization's viability, the organization's ability to continue to grow and develop. Whereas the CCIP includes some specific points, specific steps and interventions that we'll put in place. Again, the strategic plan looks at the entire organization, while the CCIP focuses on student outcomes. The strategic plan focuses on increasing and improving the capacity of the organization, whereas the CCIP, again, focuses on specific initiatives, programs, personnel, student progress. The strategic plan is what shapes what this organization will become, whereas the CCIP is a plan for using the resources, all the processes we have in place. And a big difference, as I mentioned earlier, the strategic plan aligns with the district mission and values. The CCIP, as an operational plan, aligns with the strategic plan. Next slide, please. So the first thing that we did in the fall, the board worked on this for a few meetings. We reviewed our existing mission and the board wrote a new mission. So SSD's mission is to support and empower students of all learning abilities to excel to their greatest potential. All learning abilities, all students. Next slide, please. The vision is what we're aiming for. It's what we want to do, what we want to achieve. And what we want to achieve is that every student will realize their fullest potential in life and learning. Next slide. One of the things that our board spent a lot of time on was looking at the core values. We used to have 7 core values. When you have that many, there's not one that you can really focus on. So the board identified the 3 big ones. Equity, that every student in the district deserves access to what that student needs to succeed. Commitment, everything we do revolves around our commitment to students and to their successes. And finally, collaboration. We will work with parents, students, partner districts, the community, all those stakeholders for the benefit of students. Next slide, please. So, when we started working on the plan itself, we started with some data reviews. We had 6 groups of staff who looked at various components of the district. They looked at human resources, operations, facilities, finances, communication, and student performance. In looking, and they looked at what we had already, they looked at new information, whatever they could find. And they identified several strengths, but these are the 4 big ones. The district is financially stable. That is so important to being able to sustain what we do. Human resources. Our human resources program has come millennia from where it was in the past. The facilities. We had the tax levy several years ago. Our facilities are up to date. They are safe, secure places for our teachers to teach and for our students to learn. And finally, we have a strong and talented and very committed staff. Next slide, please. At the same time, those data reviews showed some opportunities for the district to improve what we're doing. While people are doing a lot of good things, we don't have a consistent strategic database planning in place in the various departments and in instruction in the district. There is a lack of clear communication among the departments and with the stakeholders. One of the things that stood out when the group that looked at district operations, they found that there were some people in some departments who didn't know what other people in other departments did. Well, you can't have any type of internal collaboration if you don't have that knowledge to start with. And finally, there's no real certainty about the availability and the sustainability of resources. We know that we've got money, and we know that we've got materials for our students. But if you would find an administrator and ask that administrator, name all of the resources you have at your disposal, how much and what they're for, we wouldn't be able to do it. So, next slide. So based on those 3 things, we identified 3 strategic priorities. These are the most important things that the district needs to work on in order to remain viable and to grow. Systems, resources, and communications. And I'll tell you next what those mean. Next slide, please. Priority 1. We are going to implement effective, strategic database systems that efficiently and equitably support instruction and operations. We're going to have consistency in what we do within departments. We're going to have consistent approaches across the district, and we're going to use data to make all of our decisions. Next slide, please. The first strategy to achieve that is that we got to develop our administrators' skill sets for setting strategic priorities. There's a lot of inconsistent levels of knowledge in that area. So we're going to identify what we need to do, we're going to develop learning plans, and then after we provide the learning plans, we're going to evaluate the impact. Next slide, please. The second strategy for that goal was to develop internal capacity for using data systems, for gathering and analyzing data. Several years ago, we had training for our staff on using data teams. That's not something that has become part of everything in the district, so we need to get there so that we can make database decisions. So and we don't have real good data systems for everything. So we're gonna identify what we need and develop it, and then we'll train people to do it, and we'll monitor it. Next slide, please. Goal 2 is to optimize resources to equitably support students to meet their greatest potential. And this is how we're going to start to get there. We're going to identify the resources each department utilizes to accomplish its mission. If you remember what I said, if you would ask somebody to list all the resources they have, they probably couldn't do it. So we're going to compile everything, we're going to get this together, we're going to identify the best practices, then we're going to get that information out, and we're going to develop a process for departments to use. Next slide, please. The second strategy is to develop database processes to determine effective and efficient distribution. A word that I'm sure you've kept hearing from me tonight, data, 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 database. That's how we need to make our decisions. We'll develop a process to analyze resource utilization. Then we will use that process and we'll develop a way to address any gaps that we have. It's one of the ways that we will work to ensure equity across the district. Next slide. Third goal has to do with communication. Going to create a multi-channel communication strategy for two-way communication and to improve relationships across every stakeholder group, internal and external. Next slide, please. So the first strategy is to establish relationships with businesses, agencies, other stakeholders that will support student success. Our relationships with our external stakeholders need to be positive and they need to be productive. They need to accomplish something. Years ago, I worked in a district that did a huge presentation for veterans who lived in the district. Afterward, the veterans came to us and said, that was awesome, that was beautiful, thank you so much. Anything you need, just let us know. So when we came to them with something we needed, they said, well, we don't know if we can do that. So that was a positive relationship, but it was not productive in helping to support student success. Next slide, please. Strategy 2 is to engage our families. We've been doing a lot the last few years to engage our families so that they can become equal partners in the education of their children. We need to expand those efforts. Next strategy. Our next slide, please. Establish communication systems among the departments and with staff at all levels and in all departments. That involves our brand identity, identifying information needs of our staff, and implementing process to disseminate and receive information. Next slide, please. You get all this together, and one of the questions you might ask when you see all these is, where do they go? This is our strategy map. You see in the upper right-hand corner where we're trying to go. When you go someplace, you need a map that shows how to get there. The goals and the strategies show that how we're going to get there. Next slide, please. So, we've developed a plan, but we've got a lot to do before we can start to implement it. The Board of Education has already improved our strategic priorities and our strategic goals. We're going to take this to the Governing Council in June, ask for their approval. We have lots of strategies and lots of steps. We need to identify the people who will be on the teams that will do that. We need to develop key performance indicators, KPIs, both for every aspect of the strategic plan and for every department. Key performance indicators, what your key performance indicator is the key thing you're supposed to do, and the indicator shows how well you have done it. We need to develop a district dashboard. If you look at the dashboard of your car, it's got a few things on it. Gas, temperature, tax speed. It's just a few things, but they are things that you need to constantly monitor, because if one of them starts to look bad, you need to do something about it immediately. And that's what the district dashboard does. It shows a limited number, 3, 4, 5 important things that the district needs to do in order to fulfill its mission. And they are things that you can look at, the board can look at and say, this is great, or they can say, you need to do something about it. We need to develop a balanced scorecard. The idea of the balanced scorecard came out of Harvard, I think it was in the 80s. It's an idea, it shows data about everything that you do. If you were talking about a business, it would talk about things like sales, product quality, things like that, as well as staff attendance, efficiency, quality of work, and the like. So with the school, you talk about instructional impact, as well as all those operational things that we need to be doing well also. And finally, we're going to start working on the CCIP. Next slide, please. So here's our timeline. This spring, has there already been? If there hasn't been, there will be a progress report on implementation of this year's revisions of the CCIP. We will hope to obtain Governing Council approval of changes in the CCIP for next year, and obtain their approval of the strategic plan priorities and goals. This summer, we're going to start working on the CCIP. In the fall, we're going to keep working on the CCIP. We're going to develop the components of the strategic plan and the measures for the plan. Next slide, please. In the spring, we will obtain board and governing council approval for the new CCIP, and we will complete the strategic plan measures and components so that on July 1st of 2022, we are ready to implement both of them. And with all of that, does anyone have any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, so the interpreter's joint resolution, which is our SCDLS, so Shantae and Amy Blumensfield will highlight the negotiations that we came up with in our interpreters.
Good evening, President Cuneo, Vice President Potroff, Assistant Board of Directors, and Dr. Keenan. I'm Amy Schechter, the Chief Human Resources Officer. I'm joined tonight by Dan Kelly, Director of Human Resources. Dan was the lead negotiator for the district for the Special District Visual Language Specialist negotiations that took place this spring. And he is going to go through a PowerPoint this evening to share with you what the updates are. Tony Fuller, who serves as the president of that association,
was hoping to be with us this evening, but had something come up and was unable to. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan.
So on our district team, I was joined with Alan Wheat and Wendy Jensen, representing the SDBLS group, obviously Tony Fuller, Ashley Gerald, Patricia Kudrina, hopefully I said that correctly. Thank you. And Erica George. Utilized a interest-based bargaining approach, which was really focused on identifying issues and then working collaboratively to bring resolutions to the issues. Next slide, please. So this group really was kind of laser focused on just a handful of key articles that needed to be adjusted. I will say Alan, previously to me, this has done a lot of work. So I kind of was able to take over for his approach with that. So Article 11, which was really focused on employee evaluation. So we really just shifted the supervision of the interpreters from the teachers to the site-based administrators. Article 15, really just kind of tweaked the language to represent current practice. So moving from inclement weather to emergency closure. So for instance, if there was a plumbing issue, electrical issue versus a snow closure. It was already happening. They were getting credit for that. So just tying up language. Insurance and fringe benefits, Article 13, really was just adjusted based on your action in the spring to allow to start employee coverage, benefit coverage on day one of the employment. So this just reflected that current change. Article 15 kind of dealt with extended school year, kind of really looking at a time guarantee. So for instance, if a student just didn't show up that day, we felt it was reasonable to compensate the employee who drove to work an hour of their time up from 30 minutes. And then our goal would be obviously to deploy them into another field so that they can support, but in the event that there was no need, at least they were guaranteed an hour of pay. We also increased the ESY rate from $21 to $25. Last article, obviously, is just cleaning up Article 32, which is duration, so setting new dates. So it's a 2-year agreement. Next slide, please. So this group really identified some components, and then their salary agreement kind of aligned with that. So step movement for all employees. They adjusted step placement for identified groups of employees, and a wage increase to the top step of the salary schedule for a total cost of $3.78 million. Next slide, please. So year 2, again, step movement for all eligible employees. Again, adjusted step movement for those employees identified through the process. Wage increase to the top step for a total cost of $3.95. Questions? Okay.
What percentage is that?
Just over 3 for each years, for both years.
Yeah. 3.35 for that first year.
3.5 year 1. 3 year 2, correct? Yes.
And 3 for the second?
Yes.
Thank you.
Our next state will be on the curriculum and assessment. This will be given by Dr. Molly Bull, who is our Executive Director of Teaching, Learning, and Accountability. Amy, Dr. Cuneo, as a Vice President, there. And the Board of Directors. My name is Molly Bolton. I am the Executive Director of Teaching, Learning, and Accountability. And tonight I'm here to present the updated reviewed curriculum as well as the So the purpose of this presentation is to present the curriculum reviews from this past school year, as well as the course guides and the assessment plan for your students for next year. So real quickly, I just want to go through a few things. Hopefully for our new board members, this looks a little familiar. But just a few definitions. just to clarify, curriculum is the what, not the how. So it's the what we teach, not necessarily the how we teach it. It does help us provide that continuity across our SSD schools. And it's what we want our students to know and be able to do at the end of the day. It's a guide for student success, and it also ensures that all of our state standards are addressed. When we think about instruction, this is how you teach the curriculum. So this can be differentiated to meet our students' needs, and we use materials and strategies to teach our curriculum. This is our philosophy. Both are very important, and they affect student learning. So next slide. This graphic kind of shows how we put all that together. So we take our curriculum, we take our instruction and our assessment, and that all comes together to equal student learning. Slide, please. So as we look at these curriculum reviews related to the curriculum 5-year plan, I tried to make some connections here with our goals. So the first goal of our curriculum plan is that the curriculum will be reviewed and updated regularly for the SSD special education schools as well as our career and technical schools. The strategy we use for that is developing those curriculum review cycles. So when we think about how we were going to do that, we were going to have a curriculum review calendar for each of the sets of schools. Next slide, please. This is just a review of our curriculum review process and how we go through a curriculum review. So as you see, we assemble a curriculum review committee. Those members are from our school and are teachers who actually teach the curriculum that we are in the process of reviewing. Those can come from a variety of different sources. A lot of times we have teachers self-select to be on those committees. Sometimes we have administrators who ask specific teachers to serve on those committees, or the curriculum department may seek out certain teachers that they know have taught those curriculums as well. So a variety of processes. Then the curriculum committee reviews data. So some of the data we look at, you can see down here, we look at the state standards. We also kind of look at how's the implementation going, and we gather a representative from each of our schools, and part of their job is to go back and communicate with the teachers about what's going well, what might be some opportunities for improvement for this curriculum that's up for review. We also look at effectiveness through our assessments, as well as looking at the state standards and make sure that they are a part of that as well. So once we review that data, then we ask, is the curriculum aligned to the current standards? Oftentimes, DESE does change our state standards for different courses, sometimes all in 1 year, as that happened a few years ago. But we do make sure that if there are standard updates, that then we have the newest standards to make sure our curriculum is updated to meet those standards. Once we determine it is aligned with the standards, then we ask, is it effective? Is it optimally effective for our students? If we feel like there's some improvements that can be made, then we move into reviewing of the research to determine those best practices, thinking about the needs of our students, and feedback from our teachers to improve that curriculum. The curriculum is then revised. We have a stakeholder review. The stakeholder review includes all of our teachers have the opportunity to review our revised curriculum and provide feedback. We offer our families to review curriculum. This year we did that through Zoom. And we also offer our administrators a time to review and give feedback on the curriculum before we bring it to the board for the final review. We then submit it to the board for final approval. Once the board does approve it, we then train staff in the changes on the curriculum and then implement that new curriculum. Next slide. The curriculum reviews that we had for special education schools and programs this year included actually writing an early childhood curriculum. We did not previously have one. And Director Stacy Strudervant, her goal this year was to write a curriculum that could be used by our early childhood programs. So we worked together to do that. So it was the courses, if you will, in that curriculum include expressive arts, literacy, mathematics, science, social emotional learning, as well as physical development, health, and safety. that aligns directly with the early learning standards from the state. Also, we reviewed science this year. So with that, we reviewed our K through 8 math courses, as well as our science extension courses, which are those courses designed for our students assessed on the alternative math. Physical science, biology, chemistry, and earth science are our high school science course offerings that we have. And we reviewed library and media for K-12 this year. Our tech schools, we had a variety of courses that we also reviewed this year. Cisco networking, cosmetology, culinary arts, in which we did add a new strand that Kevin Andrew talked about. We added a baking strand, and that would help enhance that curriculum there. Dental science, which will be implemented in the future. Hospitality, business, entrepreneurship, law enforcement, construction trades. Anatomy and physiology, which is a science course that we integrate into our health sciences course. So students taking that course through our technical programs receive a science credit, and it's integrated into the health sciences offering. And forensic science, same thing. It's an integrated course into our law enforcement course. So they would receive a science credit that they can use towards their required credits for graduation. Next slide, please. The second goal from our curriculum 5-year plan works around into the instructional materials and textbooks. And so we want to make sure that we are updating those on a regular schedule. And so the strategy for that was to develop a review and adaptation cycle for materials. So making sure we are doing a review cycle for the special education schools as well as the technical program, and then also that talked about implementing our centralized purchasing process. Slide. So this year in the special education school, high school science was up for review. And so we did a review. The way that works is we have a review committee, again consisting of a teacher from each school that would be affected by this textbook adoption. And they come together. We gather proposals from lots of different textbook companies and have presentations from those companies. Those companies usually allow us a trial period in which our teachers can try out the materials. We come together with the presentations, and based on a textbook rubric that we have developed, the members of the committee then rate the textbooks and choose the one that they feel would best meet the needs of our students based on the research, based on trying it out with some of our students, as well as the feedback given by other teachers. So we did adopt Sabbath, which was formerly known as Pearson, for our high school science courses, which include physical science, biology, chemistry, and earth science. Also, for the career and technical schools, we had a few updates. Zoology is a new course that we wrote last year that will be an integrated science credit for our veterinary program. And so we will be purchasing textbooks for the zoology course that will be taught next year. HVAC had an updated version of their textbook that we will be purchasing, as well as fashion design. Cosmetology, there's a pivot point. It's a supplemental to the text that goes along with the textbook that would enhance the program. So we will be purchasing that. And culinary also had an updated version of the text that they currently have. We also then updated our course guides to reflect any changes. There were no changes to the special education course offerings or course guides this year. And then the CTE, we did eliminate some of our academic courses as we continue on our path of fading out that program. There were a few courses in there that we no longer need. They were 10th grade English, as well as chemistry, which we tend to offer as a 10th grade course. And so those courses were no longer needed, so those were eliminated. Next slide, please. And the last piece is our assessment plan. As required by DESE, we have to have, and board policy, the district updates the assessment plan every year. There were no major changes to the report. We did have a question from a board member, and so I'd like to kind of address that around the assessment plan. And the question, and Director Mulder, please feel free to jump in there. But the question was around looking at student self-assessment and working with students to set goals with their assessment data. We do that through our formative assessments, which is found under the mastery, and in parentheses you'll see formative assessments. We, through our classroom learning systems, have a teacher-student partnerships in which our students have student data binders. And within their student data binders, they have a lot of their assessment information, be that their district-wide testing. So, for example, if they take the STAR assessment or the iReady assessment, those results are in there. The teachers then meet with the students individually to set goals for learning around those assessments. And then those goals are reviewed frequently to show progress with those assessments. And that is the process we use for that. So that.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Next slide. That brings us to the end of the presentation. Any other questions, Dr. Pino?
I guess it was a couple board meetings ago, we were talking about multimedia in the tech schools. Are we working on a curriculum for that now?
We will, yes. Any new course that we have, we will write in curriculum before that course is implemented.
When is our start date for that multimedia?
And I'm going to defer to Kevin for that one.
So the plan for the multimedia program, just like any program, we have to have a window of opportunity to recruit students for it before we can start the program. So the goal is to start that class in August of '22. So that way we can recruit over the 21-22 school year to recruit students into that class, because we'd like to start with a full class in August of '22. That gives us the 21-22 school year as well to write the curriculum. You guys saw the objectives that are provided to us by the state. So the curriculum, it's going to look pretty similar to what you guys saw as the breakdown as far as the objectives from the state of Missouri. So we really have to follow that set objective list. We do have the ability to go deeper into specific concepts. With career and technical education, you're able to emphasize what's important for your local industry. So what's required in St. Louis is different than what's going to be required in Bauer, Missouri, is different than what's going to be required in Kansas City. And so we emphasize what's unique to our industry. And so there might be topics that we spend more time on, whereas if we were teaching in Columbia, we might not spend as much time on some of those topics.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Questions. My daughter brought this up today. She said, you know, next year in middle school, there's going to be no textbooks. Oh, I was like, really? I don't know if that's true. We were going around school. But it leads me to ask, how are we looking at our learners who could learn to 100% their computer? And I imagine it would be cost saving.
So all of the textbooks that we currently purchase, we make sure there is an online support component. We are also rolling out a one-to-one initiative next year at our SSD schools. At North Tech, we did that a few years ago, and we are working on the rollout plan right now to roll out the one-to-one initiative next year. So they would have access to a lot of their instructional materials online as well. So we'll be moving towards Chromebooks mostly, but if some students access like an iPad more easily, then we would match the student with a device that would be most helpful to them in learning. Our hope with that too is to increase family engagement, so that students would have the opportunity to generalize that learning and have more learning opportunities in the home environment as well as the school environment. Thank you.
I actually have a, sort of the other side of that coin for this question. I have a group of kids that I work with perhaps shouldn't be using a computer in school because of the infinite distraction.
Absolutely.
And I'm curious, is there a non-virtual option for these kids? Because I find myself really wishing a lot of the time that they could just have their computers taken away and not return until the end of the school year.
And that will be a decision made for what's best for that student. And so absolutely, we would think of that as well. And that's why we have both. We do pay a little bit more to have both the print option and the digital option, but we know some of our learners learn best in one of the other ways. And so we want to meet all learners' needs, so we would have both options available.
That's something parents should be able to request if they
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'd have additional for them to take home.
Molly, I'd like to go back for a moment. Maybe he can come back up. I was thinking in terms of what he mentioned about the production courses and the differences between various aspects. I'd like to know what's the difference between, for example, those production implementations between a football game in Kansas City and a soccer game in St. Louis, a theater play in Kansas City opposed to a theater play in St. Louis. What would you mean by that?
Sure. So if you remember back in April, the breakdown of the multimedia course, really, so there's a fine line between what is drama and what is career and technical education. So things that are theater productions and those types of things, that's not as much of what the multimedia course is going to emphasize. The multimedia course is focusing on things like social media, video production, audio production. Those are all pieces of that course. And so what you might see in different areas of the state is in St. Louis, you have more events than what you're going to see in a more rural setting. So in a more rural setting, you might be focusing more on social media specifically, where we might spend more time on audio production. We might spend more time on other aspects of multimedia, just depending on what your local industry needs. And so like graphic design is a component of that. The amount of time you spend on that is really going to be dictated by what your local industry need is. So in career and technical education, when you build a curriculum, you have to build an industry advisory board that's really making sure what you build is aligned to what your local need is. So every one of our career and technical education programs has an industry advisory board. The programs that Molly had on the list there of everything that was updated this school year, that industry advisory board was consulted in the revision process. So as we were working through the culinary revision process, we were conferring with those restaurants, conferring with those chefs of, we're looking to add this, we're looking to take this away, and we're really trying to make sure that we stay on the cutting edge of where we're headed. As a school district, we can't necessarily afford to be on the bleeding edge of technology, but we want to make sure that we are headed in the direction that the future is headed, so that when students leave us, they're ready to walk out our doors and walk into a career. So I can't tell you exactly what that curriculum is going to look like until that industry advisory board helps us build it next school year. I can tell you what the objectives are from the state as far as the topics that we have to cover, and that was on that handout that I gave out in my presentation in April that had each of those. I believe there's 8 categories that are a part of that curriculum. So all of those 8 areas we're going to have to cover, but the amount of time we spend in each area, that's going to be guided by our industry advisory board.
So let me ask you, so you were saying an industry advisory board as it pertains to the things that was offered up in reference to sound, cameras, and lighting. Okay? Those are 3 specific locations. So what's the differences in reference to the way that an individual learns to provide lighting that is necessary for a sporting event opposed to lighting necessary for a theater event? If they are trained within the aspects of lighting, then those particular facets of lighting comes into that training, would they not?
Again, I can't tell you specifically what the curriculum is going to look like until we get further down that road. I just know for each of our programs, we have topics that we emphasize that are different than what you might see in other parts of the state. Based off of the industries and the opportunities that exist in St. Louis, which is a more urban setting, versus what you might see in a more rural setting.
I understand that, but we're teaching kids in an urban setting.
Right.
We're in an urban setting.
Mm-hmm. And so that advisory board is going to help guide us as far as what topics we should emphasize, because the other part is we got to be focusing on where is the employability and focusing on where that opportunity growth is. So we're going to be looking pretty heavily at data specifically from Merrick, which is really going to guide us as far as where are there's opportunities for students post-high school, because that's the other part of it. The advisory board is going to be helping us as far as what topics are key for students to know when they leave us, but then also where is that employability option, because that's the goal of our programming, is at the end there has to be a post-secondary option for students.
And those 3 that I just mentioned, they all are unionized. So if they're a union, would that not dictate that there has to be some opportunity?
Just because there's a union doesn't mean that there's a high level of annual opportunities. So what we're looking at is annual job openings. So you might have a union that only has 3 or 4 openings a year. For example, let's take carpenters versus electricians. IBEW, Local 1 Electrical Union, takes in 20 new people a year. Carpenters Joint Apprenticeship, CJAP, takes in several hundred a year. So as far as opportunities of students when they leave us, there's more opportunities for that new incoming grad with the Carpenters Joint Apprenticeship than there is with Local 1 IBEW. So you really have to look at each individual union to see what is their cycle for intake, because all of them have a different intake and a different recruitment cycle.
Well, maybe we're not looking at the broader picture in that situation. The broader picture is the creativity in reference to those particular skill sets, the development of productions themselves, movies, commercials. All of those are productions. And so when you start talking about trying to fit this into a situation, you're eliminating the fact that the industry is a creative industry. Netflix looks for people all the time to be able to, in turn, put together pieces that they then contract for. So I think that we have to look at how we're opening up real-time opportunities for the creativity that the industry brings about currently. And that's the reason I was asking, because if you know how to develop lighting, as just one example, then if you are hired, your hiring then becomes with a producer who's producing a piece that requires lighting. Or if you're a camera person, so the different camera angles that are necessary, the panning, the different kinds of things that goes on when you look at a production. You're hired because of your expertise in being able to operate that camera and get those kinds of nuances that the producers and the directors are looking for.
Right.
Now, but that becomes a talent based upon a national industry, not a local industry. It's a national industry.
But keep in mind that we're high school programming, and so we're the introduction.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that a lot of students, if this is a pathway for them, they're going to continue on to a post-secondary program at a college or university level that's going to go deeper than what we cover. And there is a set of state standards that as a high school program operated in a public school district that we have to cover those state standards. And so, again, the handout I handed out in April, that's that set of state standards. So everything that's on there, we have to cover as a part of our program. And so that's going to be, again, the foundation, but then the industry advisory board is going to help guide us beyond that. Every program that we offer at North and South Tech, absolutely there is extensive nuance in every one of those careers where there are high levels of specialization. And if a student moves on post our program, they're going to be able to get that opportunity at the post-secondary level or with that individual employer to get into those very specific areas. As a high school program, introduction is really where we're at. Introduction, finding interest, finding acumen, and then we go into depth based upon what our industry advisory board recommends. That's really the structure of our programming.
And so I think that those become part of, when you were talking about being able to interest students, you've got to captivate their minds in reference to they're doing this because it represents something that they see every day now.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll think about how do I fit myself, or what do I need to know to get involved in what I actually see in that aspect of creativity. And as a vocational school, you know, we're teaching classes that you mentioned about post classes after that. Well, we teach classes that kids are not necessarily going to college after they learn what we teach them. They go into the workplace. So I would think that that would be a part of what this particular project would represent and reflect as well.
And we have to recognize that when our students are walking in the door, the majority of our students tell us their plan is post-secondary. Their plan is to go to college or university. Those plans pivot when they begin getting the job offers or the jobs that you go to that post-secondary program for. So on the way in the door at North and South Tech, more than 90% of our students tell us their plan post-high school is either 2- or 4-year college. We know from looking at our 180-day follow-up data that it's really more like a third of our students enter the workforce and 2/3 are moving on to post-secondary education. So we have a good chunk that are going directly into work. But along the way, that plan evolves. And that plan evolves based off where they find I have an interest, where I have an acumen, and then where we can connect students. And that's how all of our programs operate. So this program will be no different than our other programs, where along the way, we're trying to figure out who has an interest in a skill set, and then how do we go deeper in those areas, and then embedding opportunities for internships or other types of exposure that are going to enhance that learning environment. And that's how we operate all of our programs in career and technical education.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Budget for the 21-22 school year. And we'll be approving the budget, and then bringing it forward to the governing council. Dr. Hall?
Thank you. Good evening, President Cuneo, Vice President Potroff, Board of Education, and Dr. Keenan. My name is Jeff Hogg, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer. Tonight, I will present the final budget presentation for the FY22 budget. Thank you. Again, we have covered the 4 goals: staffing, curricular support, facilities and buildings, and equity. We have discussed major budget assumptions along the way that pertain to revenue and expenditures. The revenue by source, I wanted to bring up that it changed just slightly. We increased our federal expenditure by our federal revenue by about $322,000. And that just changes as we get more information in. So that, like I said, that changes that bottom number down at $320,000. And then expenditures, we did increase the medical by $1 million as we get more information. And so we increased that by $1 million. And then we also increased our capital projects by $2.7 million. And that is basically the rollover, so that will be covered of purchase of land, a little bit increase in buses, and some technology that we just weren't going to get by the end of this fiscal year. So that's covered in the rollover, but that did increase that bottom line a little bit. And so as you'll see on the next page, we are still projecting a deficit expenditure as we move along. And as we look at positions added for next year, I wanted to bring to your attention that as we finalized and cleaned up the additions and reductions, we did add a 0.5 for vision in student services, and we did add 1 special education coordinator in the partner districts. That increases that total there to 41.5. There were no additions from what we presented on the SSD schools. There were no additions to the SSD teaching and learning presentation. There were no additions to grounds and distribution center hauler. So on this sheet, you'll see the 95 positions. That's up from 92.5, and that incorporates the 0.5 for vision and the 1 for the area coordinator, or the special education coordinator. And then we were able to identify 4 more positions that, through attrition, we could eliminate. And that came up from 39 to 43.5. And so again, as we presented, we will run deficit spending next year. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions if you have them at this point.
All right, would someone like to make a motion to approve the consensual items? Thank you. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. All right. Next. Would someone like, let's see, didn't have an award. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the bid and award approval?
I think I had a question on that, reference to our bid processes. I'd like to provide information then on how we go about those awards and our bidding process.
Yes, thank you. The district, when we put out a bid, we advertise it in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, St. Louis American and on the district website. And as we go through that, specifically mentions in our bid, one of the questions was around equity. And so as we process those bids and we put those bids out for people for companies to bid on, we specifically mentioned the importance of in awarding bids to minority business enterprises or women business enterprises. You know, we refer to them as MBE or WBE. We have that specifically in the bid. For example, phase one of the bid that was just approved for construction on South Tech, it was awarded to a WBE. The other group that was second in the bid was an MBE. So we are attracting women business enterprises and minority business enterprises for this. It is something we will continue to work on. It's something that's very important to our purchasing department, but the specifics are in those bids. For example, Showalter and Jabouri, our auditors this past year, knew that that was important to us. And one of the subcontract aspects of the audit bid was with an MBE. And so that is one area where sometimes a company isn't a WB or an MBE, but with the subcontract, and we find a lot of that with our construction and with our roofing, where we can get into and bring in MBE and WBE companies. So to really help with the equity. As we look into this, there are 3 different lists that MBEs and WBEs can register with just in this area alone: St. Louis City, St. Louis County, and the state of Missouri. All 3 of those lists have different requirements, and then when you go from state to state, they have different requirements. There are a couple companies who are an MBE in Illinois, but not in Missouri because of the different requirements and the different, just the different certifications for that. And so that is something that we really strive for, and it's something we really work on. Just in 2 recent bids, as we were opening the bids, representatives from the companies know how important it is to us, and as we were opening the bid, made sure to mention to us that they were either a WBE or an MBE. It's something we do a very good job of, but once I received the question this afternoon, I thought, how do we get that information out? And when we're looking at the bid tabulation sheets and the award sheets, it doesn't mention that. I don't know the legalities of how to get that out, but that's something I want to work on, because we do a very good job of attracting MBEs and WBEs, but I don't know if we do a good enough job explaining or showing that those companies are. And so that's really we really want that equity piece when it comes to our bids and our awards. We're striving for that. It's something we'll continue to work on, but that piece is there. Be more than happy to answer any questions if I didn't answer them.
By any chance, do we have any idea as to what percentage of our total bids that we get? I don't know what that may be. I guess the first question would be, what's the amounts that we tally at in totals and bids often? And what percentage of that currently do we have that meet those equity criteria? And is there a goal that we in turn want to reach in making sure that we have a particular percentage of our business that in turn is represented through those equity?
I thought of the same thing. We do not have a percent. It's something that we stress, that we look at as we discuss the bids, but we don't have a percent. I couldn't come right out and tell you that 32% of bids awarded this past year have gone to an MBE or a WBE. I think that'd be the first place to start. We'll get some of that data, and then I think we can make that goal of what we would like to do and where we would like to be.
It's also my understanding that we do not need to take the lowest bid.
That's correct.
That if in fact we've had an individual who has worked for us before and was behind or did not come in on time or kept asking for additional funds because of changes, weigh that into a bid, into their bid, and make a decision based, at least factor that into our decision making.
Yes, absolutely correct.
And we have done that before in the past.
Yes.
I'm wondering in the future if we could pick that up as an agenda item to discuss a target goal for what we might want to achieve as far as
think along with our new equity plan, it's a great place to start.
My only problem with that is, when we start looking at that, I've often wondered how accurate the determinations are. Stick a wife in, I've seen people have an individual in of color just on a momentary basis. And I know we're not making decisions, who makes it, the state? Who makes the determination?
Yeah, there are those three different lists. Either St. Louis County has their requirements, St. Louis has their requirements, and the state has theirs. So to be on that list, they have to meet a certain criteria, to be on there, and we cross-check those against that list.
It's just that sometimes I wonder if people are just playing games with that.
Mm-hmm. We've seen that in the past, when individuals have minority people as fronts, but they actually don't have any ownership in the company.
Friend of mine are,
Mm-hmm.
seems to me inappropriate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would someone like, make a motion to, we have a motion to approve. No, have any other questions or discussions on this? You need a roll call, please. No, just, we need a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Assessment plan.
Motion to approve.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Closed meeting of the Board of Education. Would someone like to make a motion? Please. Question? Is there a motion to approve? Second. Questions, comments? I had a couple questions on this one. One of the things is we have to have I thought we had to have a listing of the individuals, the positions, the risk. But the board has to approve those that were ripped first. And my problem is, in our communications department, we have to approve the communications department restructuring and deal with positions that are ripped before I can approve this budget.
The way the budget has historically been done is they list additions and reductions by department. And you find,
Don't I have, but doesn't the board first have to approve those, the fact that they will be ripped?
I think what we're doing this evening is that we approve the positions, the additions and the reductions, and then in executive session, we'll discuss the RIF positions.
So what happens if in the executive session, we decide that those positions can't be ripped, or those new positions can't be there? The budget is then readjusted? So it wouldn't change. Does it change the fund, the amount paid?
No, it shouldn't, because those positions won't change.
Just as an aside, can we have a breakdown given to us of what happened with the federal funds on the CARES?
That was in the Friday memo. We broke it down and we explained how much we had, and you have a listing of all of the items that we used.
Okay.
Yes. Yes,
Thank
it's
you.
attached.
Any other questions? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. All right, now for the closed meeting. Would someone like to make a motion for a closed meeting of the Board of Education of the district administrative offices? May 25th. Okay, the May 25th at 7 p.m.
So moved.
Director Anderson.
Yes.
Director Byers. Yes. Director Faulkner.
Yes.
Director Hudson. Yes. Director Moore. Yes. Vice President Petros. Yes.
Yes. Be immediately following this meeting. Would someone like to make a motion for a closed meeting of the Board of Education on June 8th, 2021, June 8th, 2021 at 7 p.m.
Second.
Roll call on this, please.
Director Anderson.
Yes.
Director Byers. Yes. Director Faulkner.
Yes.
Director Hudson. Yes. Director Moore.
Yes.
Vice President Petros. Yes. President Coon.
Yes. Okay, would someone like to make a motion for approval of the minutes of our last meetings? Is there a second? This will be on the business meeting of April 27, 2021, and our work study minutes on May 11, 2021. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Executive meeting action items. On May 11th, the following items were approved during the April 27th executive meeting. Employment, resignations, retirement, salary adjustments, extra duty pay, and vacancy pay. 2, reemployment of administrative staff for the 2021-2022 school year. 3, reemployment of support staff for the 2021-22 school year. Reemployment of extended school year staff for summer 2021. Termination of an employment, 5 agreements, purchase of land for the new central garage. All right, board communications, anyone?
One thing, this past week, we had all of the SSD graduations, the tech schools, the SSD schools. I got to two as a board member, one as a mom. They were amazing. They were great. It was wonderful to see all of our students celebrate their big day. It was really heartwarming and touching, and I hope it was for all the students and families.
I'd like to second that. I was at, one mother probably gave one of the most heartfelt talks that I've ever heard of anyone. Proud to be in this organization. It was really touching. Dr. Haslam, you were there.
Yeah.
overflow with the motion.
Okay, let everyone read their calendar of events. Would someone like to make a motion for adjournment?
Second.
All in favor? All opposed?